I used to know everything. It was a pretty good feeling being able to answer any Bible question, to dig into any subject, to know the book, chapter, and verse for all of life's problems. And as I began to study and to grow, I realized that there were things that I didn't know. But even more than that, I realized that there were things that I didn't know that I didn't know. Like, for example, I knew that I didn't know Greek, and I knew that I didn't know Hebrew, and I knew that I couldn't exegete the depths of Ezekiel. But there were things that I didn't know that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know about mysticism. I didn't know about other contemplative traditions across religious groups. I didn't know about Christian Science. There were lots of things that I didn't know that I didn't know. And one thing that I did know, though, is that this phenomenon of learning and realizing the depths of one's own ignorance is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So imagine, is this pretty good? This would be good. So imagine you start here with no knowledge, and then you grow, and you get just a little bit of knowledge. This is called the mountain of stupidity. And the idea is that you're super arrogant during this time when you're on this mountain. And a lot of people stay there basically indefinitely. They'll stay there thinking that they know everything, but really just being arrogant and a bit prideful and really, really, really hard to be around. And then what happens is something gives. They read that book, they hear that lecture, they meet that person that knows way more than they do. And then they just drop off into this deep valley of shame and unknowing that you're probably familiar with as being imposter syndrome. And maybe you feel imposter syndrome in different ways. Like anytime someone tells me that they think that I'm a great preacher or that I'm destined to be a good author or something like that, I have trouble even saying that out loud because it's really, really hard to believe. There's this constant feeling of imposter syndrome. But really what imposter syndrome is even though you technically know more than you did, say, 6 months ago, you are so aware of your own ignorance that you're not even confident in the things that you do believe. And then as you grow and as you learn and as you study, you come out of that imposter syndrome, and that's when you can be like a scholar in a particular field, maybe a teacher or a professor of some kind. What nobody tells you, though, is that these Dunning-Kruger effects stack on top of each other. So while your mind is being blown about eschatology, for instance, like the study of the end times, it's like you learn a lot and you're super confident, and then your mind's blown on it. You still might be super confident in terms of apologetics or making arguments for the existence of God or arguing for the textual accuracy of particular passages or whatever, right? And then you just it's just like a never-ending, all these infinitely parallel roller coasters that are rising and crashing and rising and crashing. And eventually, I feel like in this cycle of mountain of stupidity, imposter syndrome, sort of knowing what you're talking about, you begin to become disillusioned with the whole idea of certainty, of knowing anything at all, right? And I feel like that's where I get sometimes, where I become so disillusioned with what I know or what I don't know or what I don't know that I don't know, that it makes it hard for me to even express myself with any kind of confidence, with any kind of surety, with any kind of bravado that might be required in particular situations. In fact, I even find myself at times pulling punches in debate or discussion or whatever. I know that I've got the zinger, but I hold it back a bit because part of me wonders, is it as zingy of a zinger as one can zing, right? And you don't want to throw something out there that you think is a zinger only for it to come back flat or whatever, right? And I was having, for example, I was talking to a friend at a coffee shop, and we were talking about a conversation that we had previously with another group of people. And I made an observation about the conversation, and she was like, "Why didn't you share that then?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't." And maybe it's because of this being bombarded with the Dunning-Kruger effect, all these roller coasters just falling and crashing and falling and crashing. However, in some cultures, the idea that you can freely admit that you don't know and have the kind of humility that accompanies that sometimes even feels like and being an imposter, right? Because even if someone tells you, oh, you're so humble, something within you goes, oh, yes, I'm so humble. And even then you're like, wait, I'm not as humble as I thought I was. And so even being humble is something that can be afflicted by the imposter syndrome. So in some cultures, though, knowing everything is the price of admission. Like if you want to be in the in-group, if you want to be accepted and trusted, then you can have no doubts, no insecurities, no questions. Everything has to be fixed and certain. Some churches would even give a questionnaire to an incoming minister, making sure that he can check very clearly yes or no on all the appropriate responses with very little, if any, maybes. And I think that's part of the problem is a lot of us get into maybes and allow maybes for things. Even though we think we know that the answer, we'll still allow maybes for stuff just out of caution or just out of, again, humility, or just because we've been burned so many times by the roller coaster, right? That we need that respite. Just to give you some examples of quotes that I've actually read. I'm not even kidding. These are things I've actually heard people say. One guy left a comment on a social media post, and he said something to the effect of, "I've never changed my mind in all my years of preaching or teaching within this specific denomination." Like, what, you've never changed your mind? This is crazy. Sometimes I'll be like doing a sermon, and I will change my mind before I get to the end of the sermon and have to go back and rework everything I was going to say before. Or like something will hit me that I didn't know before, and it makes me like completely rework everything. Or even worse, you're working on something and then you realize that you're wrong like a week later after you've already given the sermon. And then you have to go back and be like, so last week I was talking crazy. There's a squirrel to my left. Oh, by the way, I'm at the beautiful Lake Guntersville State Park. And so if you hear any birds or squirrels or anything like that, if this microphone doesn't automatically cancel it out, then you'll be blessed. There's a cowbird. Have you ever heard a cowbird? I've only heard maybe like 2 or 3 of them in my life. And this one specifically, I heard last week too. And I came back up here, in fact, to hear it. And it goes like, it sounds like, hang on, let's see. That's what a cowbird sounds like. I mean, basically. It's more like, yeah, like that. Yeah, that's a cowbird. Anyways, it makes you think somebody's walking up the trail with like a big jug of water, but it's just a cowbird. Anyways, so there's times when I change my mind, like podcast to podcast, and I'm like, what have I done? And that's why I think it's so important to hold things loosely. I'm reading this book on hell right now. Let's see. There it is, by Rubel Shelley. A friend of mine gave it to me. He might actually listen to this podcast. What's up, Steve? And he wanted me to read it and check it out. And one of the things he's stressing in there is like he's just offering something. He's not wanting to be dogmatic about anything that he says throughout the book. He just wants to offer it. He does believe what he believes, and he's presenting something that he feels confident in. But at the end of the day, with such a touchy subject as hell, the most that he can do is make an offering. And that's what I try to do in basically everything that I do. Another comment that I read, this was some years ago, he said, if your elders ever stand up, if your church leaders ever stand up during the service or at the end of service or start of service, on Sunday morning, and they're like, well, we've been studying and we've changed our mind on something, run. And I commented back very stupidly. I commented back, if your elders have never stood up and said, we've been studying and we've changed our mind on something, you probably need to run. Because the idea that we've already got it all figured out and 200 years of perfectly restoring the church, if you're from the Stone Camel movement, is quite ludicrous. The idea that we've already got it figured out after 2,000 years of continued church history is also equally ludicrous. I actually like what C.S. Lewis says when he says he believes that we're in the early church still. Like if you imagine, if the earth lasts for another 15,000 years, right, in popular thinking, then we're still in the early church. We're just taking our baby steps. We're just starting to toddle. And so we need to be patient with ourselves and with others as we continue this ancient conversation about what is God like. Another line that you might hear in a church where certainty is elevated over faith is something like this. show us where we're wrong and we'll change. I heard Pete Enns once say one time in his book, The Sin of Certainty, which is really good for those of you who are still coping with the idea of needing to be certain in all of your doctrines. He said, the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. It's a good book, Sin of Certainty, Pete Enns. One thing that I've learned, though, in my experience, is saying, show us where we're wrong or we'll change, is actually a bit of a trap. And it's a trap to identify people who are beginning to change their mind. And so the idea is, as soon as they feel safe enough to come to you and say, hey, I'm questioning something, you can put out the fire of dissent as quickly as possible, so that they don't continue to question and evolve their beliefs as they continually question and study and wonder. However, if you take this idea seriously, as some people I know have, then you can't help but change. Because the idea that any one group of people has all of doctrine completely figured out is so bold. I mean, that is such a what's the likelihood, right? When you consider the depth of revelation or all the intricacies within the book of Daniel, the idea that somebody has all of that perfectly figured out with no variance at all, it's crazy. So if you take this seriously, show me where I'm wrong and I'll change. If you're given this spirit of exploration and you actually embrace it, you can't help but change something. Now that doesn't mean you'll go off away from what everybody else around you believes, but you'll change something, right? Because the idea that anybody's got it figured out is lottery level, astronomically small. And so what happens in the pool of certainty, or the serene lake of certainty, when someone has everything figured out, when they know everything, a rock of change is dropped, maybe in the corner of the pond, maybe in the center. And what happens is a ripple effect grows across the pond where the illusion of certainty is totally shattered. When this happens, you basically are afforded a choice. You can imagine a circle, right? And everybody in the circle is in Christ. Everybody outside of the circle is outside of Christ, in this paradigm. And so in this idea, when you learn something new, either the circle is going to constrict a little bit to only include the people who agree with what you now know. And then the circle will constrict more. And eventually you'll get to a person of one, a church of one. Or you realize that the whole idea of a circle with a set circumference is ludicrous, and that Christ is all and in all, and Christ is bigger than anybody could ever imagine. And so the circle either expands like crazy or blows up altogether. And you come to this idea that God is a circle whose circumference is, whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere, which is a crazy invitation. And so then what you have is this idea of cautious confidence. I think that's where I'm at, is cautious confidence, where I have a pretty good feeling that the things that I believe are good for where I'm at right now, but I'm also cautious in that I never want to overstate my case, and I want to be open to being challenged and things like that. In a class I'm taking right now on history of theology, ancient insights, we're in the third stage of that class. So we did early church, we did medieval times. Now we're in Reformation era. And we read a book by John Calvin, which everybody loved. And some of the people in my class were like, blah, John Calvin, bad. And I'm like, yeah, I agree, John Calvin, bad. At the same time, though, thank goodness John Calvin existed. Because had John Calvin not existed, we wouldn't be able to critique him, right? In other words, we wouldn't be where we are now if he hadn't existed. And the beautiful thing about that is, one day, my son, at some point, is going to look at me and he's going to go, Dad, you've really thought a lot about theology, but dude, you have missed some pretty major things. And that is going to be such a gift, because I can't go as far as he can go, right? And so I set him up to take whatever I give him to the next level, to get whatever I give my daughter for her to take it to the next level. And so my goal isn't to create copies of myself, but is to invite people into the image of Christ, an image that is just so far beyond anything that I am or that I ever could be. And so the idea that my daughter will one day look me in the face and be like, Dad, that's pretty messed up, yeah. That is so delightful to me. Okay, so fast forward to the Friday following Easter, 2026. I'm co-leading a retreat called Discovering Renewal, and we're leading like 20 people through the woods every day. Most of them are church workers in some way, whether they're pastors or teachers, whether they're church administration staff, or just people who are trying to discover renewal, maybe as doctors or nurses or school teachers or whatever. Just kidding. School teachers can't get off during the school year, so wouldn't be any school teachers there. Although actually, I do think that there was a teacher there in a Catholic school. They must have had the week off after Easter. Who knows? Okay. So anyways, we have all these people on hikes, and then on Tuesdays and Fridays, I had the special privilege of leading people on a sunrise hike. So the first day, we just spent the time sharing poetry and reflecting on passages as we went up to the top of the mountain to enjoy a lookout during the sunrise. But on Friday, I woke up at like 3 a.m., something like that. And as I did on Tuesday, with my mind racing, I went out and walked around this lake called Lake Susan, which is not as big as a lake. It's like a small pond. But since it has water going in and water going out, I think it's classified as a lake. And I'm walking around Lake Susan, and as I turned the corner to go across the dam, I saw a goose and a duck who'd been hanging out on the lake all week, swimming towards me. And I noticed that they were altering their trajectory to match mine as I was going around the corner. And when I got to the opposite side of Lake Susan, I was standing on this pebble beach, looking out over the water. Here come the duck and the goose towards me, and then on a small, very small island to my left, there's the mother goose, who is sitting presumably upon a nest of eggs, as she does every year, although she was in a different spot this year for reasons unknown. Maybe because the hurricane had changed too much or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, so here they come. Meanwhile, we had been listening to a series of lectures that week about how nature shows up within the Christian tradition, whether it's in the book of Psalms, whether it's in the book of Romans, like Romans chapter 8. How do themes of creation and nature and things like that show up? And one of the things that she told us to do was go out and seek wisdom in nature. There's a poem by Wordsworth that goes like this: "Up, up, my friends, and quit your books, or surely you'll go double. Up, up, my friends, and clear your looks, wild is toil and trouble. The sun above the mountain set a freshening lustre mellow, through all the long green fields has spread his first sweet evening yellow. Books, 'tis a dull and endless strife, come hear the woodland linnet. How sweet its music in my life, there's more of wisdom in it. And hark how blithe the throstle sings, he too is no mean preacher. Step forth into the light of things, let nature be your teacher. She has a world of ready wealth, our hearts and minds to bless, spontaneous wisdom breathed by health, truth breathed by cheerfulness. Sweet is the lore which nature brings, our meddling intellect mishapes the beauteous form of things we murder to dissect. One impulse from a vernal wood can teach you more of men, of moral evil and of good, than all the sages can. So enough of science, enough of art. Close up those barren leaves, come forth and bring with you a heart that watches and receives." I believe I swapped the next to last two stanzas, and that's okay. But the idea is that we go into the woods to learn, to allow God's first incarnation, in a sense, is what some have called it, to teach us. And so I'm sitting there on the pebble beach, about 3 feet away from this goose. I'm sitting on a rock. He's like standing ankle deep for a goose in water next to me. And I'm just looking at him and he's looking at me. And I'm like, "Yo, Goose, what can I say this morning?" Like, what is the goose going to say to me, right? And as I look at him, on his nostril, like on his beak, I guess, there's a little bubble that forms and then pops. And then it happened actually a second time. And I started laughing because I'm like, okay. I ask a question. What does a 33-year-old guy have to say to a group of seasoned pastors, teachers, and thinkers? And all I got in response was a goose bubble. So immediately I'm laughing because, like, what in the world? And I start to walk. I get back up and I'm like, okay, that's good. So I walk around the lake learning not to take myself so seriously. And as I walk across this bridge and around the corner, I'm going to sneak back up to the hotel where we're staying and go back and write some of this down, right? Or just, have a cup of coffee or whatever. And I look back across the lake and here come the duck again. And the duck is like quack, quack, like trying to get my attention. And the goose is just zooming across the lake. I'm like, wasn't supposed to leave yet, I guess. And so I just complete the loop and get back to where I was, back on the Pebble Beach. And as I'm walking, it hits me that this question, have you ever seen a goose bubble, can function in a couple of different ways. It can function as a noun. Like, have you ever seen an object that is formally known as a goose bubble? It could also function as a verb, as if bubbling is something that geese do. Have you ever seen a goose bubble? And apparently bubbling is something that geese do. It could also function as you asking a question to the bubble. Have you ever seen a goose bubble? That is, Mr. Bubble sitting upon the goose's beak. Have you ever seen a goose? And it's the answer to that question that really got me going. Took me, of course, obviously, to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, which says, goose bubbles of goose bubbles, says the preacher, all is a goose bubble. Just the idea that all of life, right, appears for a little time and then vanishes away, whether you're Job or you're James. And this got me thinking, this is an invitation to not take ourselves so seriously. I mean, what are people at 6:15 a.m. on a Friday after hiking or doing yoga or doing contemplative exercises, whatever, all week? Like, what are those people expecting at Friday at 6:15? Probably not anything too profound, because they probably assume that I'm equally as tired as they are. And so this is an invitation, I think, not to take ourselves so seriously. We are but goose bubbles who appear for a little time and vanish away. And we're also not the main character. The main character is the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Spirit, who will accomplish what they set out to accomplish. Love cannot be stopped. And so the idea that I play a part in this is on the one hand silly, but on the other hand profound, because I'm but a goose bubble, and yet, as Paul says in 2 Corinthians, God has chosen that it is through goose bubbles that he'll make his good news known. It's through earthen vessels, right? And this is also a brilliant reminder that when we're speaking of God, we are but offering a goose bubble's opinion on the divine. I want to share with you something that I wrote here. This is from the same retreat. Here's what I wrote. We hold up a stone to tell people what a mountain is like. We show people a twig to try to explain the essence of a tree. We tell someone our name as if that's telling someone who we are. Climb the mountain, sit under the tree, open up your heart. Accept the sermons, appreciate the songs, say amen to the prayers, but know that these are but stones and twigs and names. Open your heart to the divine and realize you are known, loved, and cherished. See, we're just goose bubbles. And yet, even though we're goose bubbles, what we can offer is special. I think Paul may have had goose bubbles in mind when he was writing to his young friend Timothy. And he tells Timothy, let no one despise your youth. That is, let no one think that you're not qualified to do this job just because you're young. And there's two ways to think about that. One is, you're obviously qualified because the Holy Spirit is within you. And the other way to read it is, why would they despise your youth? And in light of the infinite God, everybody is but a baby, right? Everybody's just a goose bubble. You appear for a little while and vanish away. And so I think maybe the first meaning is what Paul intended, but I can see the second meaning as well. And perhaps not letting someone despise your youth starts with you, right? Even if you're in that imposter syndrome valley, or even at the top of the mountain of stupidity, or figuring out what it means to be an expert in your field. Don't even let yourself despise your youth. Don't let yourself think that just because you are inexperienced, or because you don't know a lot, or because you don't know how to put things in the right words or whatever, that what you have are not worth sharing. Because goose bubbles are worth sharing. And I think after these 10 years, 13 years of ministry, 10 years of my realization that I'm but a goose bubble, I think I'm starting to actually believe that what I have is worth sharing. And I think you should embrace that as well. All right. Love you. Thanks for joining me. Please follow the podcast if you haven't already, either on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And you can also rate it on some of those to let other people know that goose bubbles are worth sharing. All right. God bless.